You've found nightfall murmurs. When day fades into silence, the world begins to whisper. Some stories come as murmurs, some as warnings, but they all come at night. Don't be afraid to listen, but never listen alone. The twin beams of my aging sedan sliced through the inky void, painting a fleeting ribbon of highway across the canvas of night. Hours had bled together, measured only by the rhythmic drone of the engine and the stark digital glow of the dashboard clock, marking time's relentless passage into the deep unknown. Then, a disruption. A silhouette coalescing from the gloom at the roadside, thumb starkly angled against the darkness, a phantom conjured from the desolate expanse. Prudence instilled by maternal warnings. "Never stop, Elias. You invite shadows into your life," screamed caution. Yet proximity revealed more than just a shape. It showed a figure bowed by something heavier than fatigue, shoulders slumped in a universal language of defeat. Out here, adrift in this sea of blacktop and silence, what were the odds another vessel would pass before dawn? Before the voice of reason could fully articulate its dissent, the crunch of gravel beneath my tires announced my surrender to impulse. Dust billowed, a fleeting ghost in the taillights. The figure straightened, then hastened towards the car, a fissure of relief cracking his weathered features as the passenger window descended. "God send," he rasped, the sound like stones tumbling in a dry creek bed. "Thought I'd take root out here." Closer now, the geography of his face spoke of years etched by sun and hardship, placing him somewhere north of 50. His eyes, however, held a startling, almost febrile alertness that seemed out of place in the car's dim sanctuary. "Destination?" I inquired, striving for nonchalance, though a cold tendril of apprehension had begun its slow coil within my stomach. "Just yonder," he replied, hand already closing on the door latch. "Hamlet called Havenwood, 50 miles, give or take. I can find my way from there." A flicker of hesitation. My thumb hovered near the lock, but the imagined chill of being stranded, watching taillights recede like dying embers, tipped the scale. With a resigned sigh, the mechanism clicked open. "Climb aboard," I offered, forcing a tightness across my lips that might pass for a smile. "My route aligns." He slid in, clutching a scuffed canvas duffel to his chest, as if it contained relics. As the car merged back onto the asphalt river, a faint, unpleasant aroma permeated the cabin. Sweat, stale earth, and something else, sharp and metallic, eluding identification. "Elias," I volunteered, mostly to puncture the thickening silence. "Silas," he returned, his gaze fixed forward, tracking the hypnotic centerline. "Appreciate the lift. Folks don't often pause these days." I offered a non-committal hum, my thoughts already leaping ahead, calculating the minutes until Havenwood. 50 miles, 45 minutes perhaps, manageable. We traveled through a vacuum of sound, save for the engine's thrum and the occasional rustle of Silas shifting beside me. Peripheral glances painted a fragmented portrait, the worn knuckles, the steady, unnerving gaze. An indefinable otherness clung to him, a dissonance I couldn't resolve. "So," I ventured, the quiet becoming unbearable, What errand brings you to this stretch?" Silas remained silent for a beat, and when he finally spoke, his voice seemed to emanate from a place far removed. "Seeking resolution," he stated, "with someone who dealt me a profound injury long ago." An involuntary shiver traced my spine, the reason obscure. "Ah," I managed, attempting lightness. "Catching up with an old acquaintance?" His laughter was abrupt, harsh, a bark that startled. "Not precisely," he countered, "but the finding is imminent, and when it occurs—" His voice trailed off, his grip visibly tightening on the duffel strap. My throat constricted. "Well," I said, the words sounding brittle, "I hope your search proves fruitful." Silas turned then, his eyes catching the intermittent dash lights, seeming to glint. "Oh, it will," he affirmed, his tone low, imbued with a chilling intensity. "The hunt has been long, but I'm close. The scent is strong now." A nod was my only reply. Speech felt treacherous. My hands gripped the steering wheel, knuckles white promontories. Every nerve ending shrieked a warning. Eject him. Now. Yet the isolation held me captive, the fear of his reaction in this void outweighing the urge to flee. So I drove on, the miles dissolving with excruciating slowness. Silas had fallen quiet once more, but the weight of his scrutiny was palpable, a physical pressure against my skin. The air grew thick, heavy, making each breath a conscious effort. "You know," Silas broke the silence suddenly, causing me to jump. "You carry his likeness, the man I pursue." My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat surely audible in the small space. "Is that a fact?" The words emerged strangled. Silas nodded slowly, his gaze unwavering. "Indeed, similar frame, the hair's shade, even drives a comparable vehicle." He paused, his hand delving into the canvas bag beside him. "Fate plays curious games, wouldn't you agree?" I offered no response, my focus riveted to the road ahead. Far off, a faint constellation of lights beckoned. Havenwood. Just a few more miles. Endurance was key. "Another curiosity?" Silas pressed, his voice acquiring a razor's edge. I never specified the sort of automobile he favored. Ice flooded my veins. My mouth opened, a soundless gasp. But before any coherent thought could form, a cold, unyielding pressure materialized against my side. "Pull onto the shoulder," Silas commanded. All traces of weary traveler evaporated, replaced by chilling authority. My thoughts fractured, scrambling for an escape route that didn't exist. The object digging into my ribs, a gun, undoubtedly, left no room for negotiation. Tremors ran through my hands as I steered the sedan onto the gravel verge. "Engine off," he ordered. I complied, numbly, mechanically. The instant the key turned, he snatched it from my grasp. "Now," he continued, his voice unnervingly placid. "We converse. You'll recount every detail of that night. A decade past." Confusion warred with primal terror. "What are you talking about?" I stammered. "I have no idea." The pressure intensified, silencing me. "No falsehoods," Silas snarled. "I recognize you. That night you obliterated my existence, my wife, my children, everything. Tonight I reclaim a measure of balance. The horrifying truth struck with the force of a physical blow. He saw not me, Elias Vance, but the ghost he'd hunted across the years. "Please," I begged, my voice fracturing. "This is a terrible error. I'm not him. My name is Elias Vance. I'm 25. I work in tech, in the city. 10 years ago, whatever occurred, it wasn't me." Silas's eyes narrowed, a flicker of uncertainty crossing his features before hardening again into rigid conviction. "A clever fabrication," he growled, "but 10 years provides ample time for deceit. I've searched too long to be swayed now." My mind spun, desperate. "My wallet," I urged quickly. "Look at my driver's license. It has my photo, my details. It will prove it." For a protracted moment, Silas merely stared, his eyes attempting to bore through my facade, seeking the phantom he believed hidden within. Then, a slow, deliberate nod. "Very well," he conceded, "but attempt any sudden movement." The unspoken threat hung heavy, punctuated by the gun's unwavering presence. With trembling fingers, I retrieved my wallet, extracted the plastic card, and held it aloft. Silas squinted, leaning closer in the faint interior light, his brow furrowed in concentration. I held my breath, a silent prayer ascending. This isn't possible," he muttered, snatching the license for a closer inspection. "It's the truth," I insisted, my voice gaining a sliver of steadiness born of desperation. "I am not the man you seek. Please, just let me leave. I won't report this, I swear." Silas looked from the license to my face, then back again, confusion and fury battling for dominance in his expression. For an instant, hope surged. Perhaps reason would prevail. But then, his features solidified into an impassive mask. "No," he stated, shaking his head. "No, merely another layer of deception. A decade is long enough to craft a new life, a false identity. But I know you. That face is seared into my memory." My hope plummeted. He was unreachable, lost in the labyrinth of his own grief and vengeance. I was simply the vessel for his retribution. "Exit the vehicle," Silas ordered, motioning with the weapon. "Please," I whispered, one final appeal to a humanity perhaps long extinguished. "This won't bring them back. Whatever pain you carry, I am truly sorry for it. But my death won't mend your past." A fleeting shadow crossed Silas's eyes. Was it doubt? A ghost of the man he once was? It vanished as swiftly as it appeared. "Out!" he repeated, the word flat, devoid of emotion, utterly final. There was no alternative. I pushed the door open, stepping out into the cool, indifferent night air. Silas followed, the gun unwavering as he circled to my side. "Walk," he commanded, gesturing towards the vast, unlit expanse stretching away from the road. Taking the first unsteady steps off the gravel shoulder, away from the faint security of the highway, my thoughts turned to those I was leaving behind. My parents, friends, colleagues. Would they search endlessly, as Silas had? Or would Elias Vance simply dissolve into another statistic? A whispered warning about the perils of misplaced compassion. The end of this night remained shrouded. But as I stumbled forward into the encroaching darkness, Silas, a menacing presence at my back, a silent vow formed. Should I somehow survive this crucible, instinct would henceforth be my unheeded guide, and the open road would never again see me offer passage to a stranger. The lights of Havenwood, once a beacon of deliverance, shimmered distantly, already receding, surrendering us to the immense, silent indifference of the desert night. Rain wept across the afternoon landscape as I arrived, the heavens a bruised, weeping grey, the wind's raw bite scouring my face. My destination, a gaunt edifice crumbling at the terminus of a sodden drive, hemmed in by skeletal trees. Clutched in my hand was a meager satchel, notebook, torch, sustenance, the bulk of my belongings relegated to the car's chilly interior. Patches of scabrous paint clung precariously to the exterior walls. The windows gaped like vacant eyes. Research drew me here. The siren call of inspiration for a novel whispered from the town's folklore. Tales that painted this place in shades of spectral dread. I meant to test the substance of those shadows. The porch steps, a groaning ascent, protested my weight. A tremor ran through me, my pulse quickening its cadence against my ribs. Unlatched, the front door yielded to my push with a low scrape against the warped floorboards. Immediately, an exhalation of decay, damp timber, aged textiles, enveloped me. I stood arrested in the foyer, allowing my vision to penetrate the gloom. Vaulted ceilings stretched into shadow overhead. To my left, a staircase ascended, its balustrade fractured like broken teeth. Motes of dust danced in the thin light. Somewhere within the house's labyrinthine depths, water dripped, a relentless liquid metronome. My torch flared to life, its beam interrogating peeling damask walls and a gallery of ancestral portraits. Stern visages stared back, blurred by time's erasure, their painted eyes seeming to follow. Each footfall elicited a groan from the floor, amplifying the silence, tuning my senses to an almost unbearable pitch. My breath hitched, ragged in the stillness. Methodical exploration felt necessary, a bulwark against rising apprehension. I began where I stood. The foyer walls offered nothing. A small cabinet disgorged only a single dust-filmed glass bottle, which I discarded with a careless flick. It chimed forlornly against the floorboards. A nervous energy thrummed beneath my skin. The constant expectation of movement glimpsed at the periphery of sight. Still, I pressed onward, venturing into what seemed a drawing room to the right. The air here was thick, redolent of brittle paper and wood returning to earth. Heavy draperies, lightless and thick, suffocated two large windows. My torchlight skimmed over a divan, shedding its upholstery like dead skin. A dust-mantled table, skeletal bookshelves, titles swam into view. Forgotten novels, leather-bound journals worn smooth by handling. One such volume yielded to my touch. Its pages whispered of quotidian concerns, notations on household tasks, mentions of callers, rudimentary sketches of the grounds. No dramatic revelations, no key to the house's rumored secrets. Then, a soft concussion from above. I froze, muscles locking, the torch beam aimed uselessly at the stained ceiling plaster. Silence descended again, thick and watchful. My heart hammered a frantic rhythm against my sternum. Waiting, nothing more. An animal, perhaps, seeking refuge from the downpour. Yet a disquiet coiled within me. It demanded investigation. Retreating to the foyer, I faced the staircase. Each tread felt precarious, issuing its own distinct complaint under my boots. The upper landing swam in near darkness, save for the mournful grey light filtering through a fractured window pane at the corridor's end. A bitter tang, reminiscent of old varnish, stung my nostrils. Doors lined the narrow passage, silent sentinels. My footsteps echoed unnervingly. Left, right, the torch beam sliced through the oppressive gloom, illuminating closed portals. My pulse surged, a frantic drumbeat. My mouth felt parched. Reaching the first door on the right, I paused, listening intently. Silence. The handle resisted, then turned with a reluctant groan. A small bedchamber revealed itself. Cracked plaster, a skeletal bed frame canted against the wall, a solitary, dust-shrouded chair. The scent of long undisturbed linen hung heavy. A faint rustle. Fabric? Or something else? My breath caught. I swept the light into the room's corners. Empty. The sound ceased. I withdrew slowly, easing the door shut behind me. Down the corridor, I continued, a fine sheen of perspiration gathering on my brow despite the chill air. A tremor worked its way into my hands. I willed it still. Past another closed door, then a third. The final door on the left stood slightly ajar. As I approached, a flicker, a shadow perhaps, darted across the sliver of opening. My heart leapt. My hand, slick with sweat, fumbled on the knob. Steadying myself, I pushed. A study, it seemed. A desk commanded the far wall, flanked by a bookshelf. Heavy drapes masked the window. Stale air, yes, but laced with the ghost of old tobacco smoke. Scraps of paper littered the floor like fallen leaves. I stepped inside, the torch beam playing over the desk's surface. Scattered letters lay there, beside a small lamp, its bulb shattered. I leaned closer, drawn to the script on one missive. I keep hearing someone downstairs. The doors open and close, but I find no one. Ice traced its way down my spine. The words resonated with the formless dread that had shadowed me since crossing the threshold. Another sound, this time from the hallway. A slow, deliberate drag, like something heavy being pulled across the floorboards. My chest constricted. Dropping the letter, I moved to the doorway, projecting the torch beam into the corridor's waiting darkness. Vacant, yet the sensation of being observed intensified, a palpable pressure against my skin, eyes I could not see. I stood rigid, straining to hear, listening past the drip, drip, drip and the wind's low moan. The very air felt dense, difficult to draw into my lungs. My voice, when I finally found it, was a thin, reedy thing. "Hello, is anyone here?" The silence that answered was profound, broken only by the house's own mournful sounds. The fine hairs on my arms prickled erect. I backed out of the study, contemplating retreat, perhaps just a breath of rain-washed air downstairs. Turning towards the landing, something shifted near the stairwell's head. A nebulous form, a momentary distortion in the gloom. I blinked, swung the torch. Gone. Nausea churned low in my belly as adrenaline surged. Step by deliberate step, I forced myself forward, the floorboards groaning their ancient protest. Each footfall felt leaden. Reaching the staircase, I peered down into the foyer. It seemed altered somehow, steeped in a deeper twilight. And then, the whispers began. Faint, sibilant murmurs, too indistinct to decipher, yet urgent. My pulse hammered in my ears. My breathing grew shallow, rapid. The torch beam jittered, seeking a source, finding only dust, decay, and the battered guardian of the front door. A strange compulsion warred with my fear. I hadn't finished. The house held secrets, clung to them, and I felt magnetically drawn to unearth them. Down the stairs I went, each step echoing in the charged silence. A brief wave of dizziness washed over me. I clung to the banister, pressing onward. Back on the ground floor, my light found a hallway leading towards the rear of the mansion. The kitchen, perhaps? Or cellars mentioned in brittle local records? I advanced down this new passage. More peeling paper, the pattern lost to time and damp. The smell shifted, acquiring a sour, mildewed edge. Tension knotted my shoulders, my heart a frantic captive in my chest. The hallway terminated at a door opening into a vast kitchen. Neglect reigned supreme. Counters lay buried under dust and fallen plaster. A rusted sink sat beneath a grime-streaked window. Old iron pots and pans were strewn across a central wooden table, silent casualties of abandonment. A scuttling sound. Rats, surely. I swallowed against a rising gorge and ventured deeper. Chairs stood sentinel around the table, one lying defeated on its side. Beside a pantry, another door, narrower, beckoned. The cellar entrance. My torch revealed stone steps descending into absolute blackness. A current of cool, damp air rose to meet me, carrying the scent of raw earth and advanced rot. Hesitation warred with the insistent pull to know what lay beneath. The first step felt cold, uneven beneath my boot. My breath grew shallow again as I descended, the torch beam tracing the damp-streaked stone walls. Each step seemed to sink slightly, threatening collapse. Deeper. Finally, the packed dirt floor of the cellar crunched underfoot. The ceiling pressed low, forcing a stoop. Crates, barrels, decaying shelves, lined with glass jars, most empty, some holding indeterminate dark masses, relics of forgotten preservation. The stench was cloying, visceral. I recoiled. Methodically, I swept the light along the walls, searching for hidden niches, concealed doorways. Only cobwebs, thick as shrouds, and drifts of dust. Then, behind me, a scrape, distinct, a foot dragging through the dirt. I spun, torch beam stabbing the darkness. Nothing. Empty space. My pulse leapt, a wild thing against my ribs. A bead of sweat tracked a cold path down my temple. Calm, I told myself. Stay calm. Assess. A sound, yes, but no visible source. The cellar wasn't large, hiding places were few, yet the feeling of being watched intensified, prickling across my nape. My hands shook, the torch beam dancing erratically. I began backing towards the stairs, heart pounding painfully. And then, from the corner of my vision, a drift of movement at the cellar's far end. Pale, less a shape than a disruption in the darkness. I wrenched the light towards it. Gone. Fear seized me, cold and absolute. I scrambled up the stairs, two at a time, heedless of the noise, propelled by pure, primal terror. Back in the relative safety of the kitchen, I slammed the cellar door, the sound echoing unnaturally loud. My breath came in ragged gasps. My legs felt like water. Leaning heavily against the wall, I pressed my forehead to the cool, peeling paper. Eyes squeezed shut. The house pulsed around me, alive with inexplicable sounds, unseen movements. I fought for composure, reminding myself of my purpose. Research, material. But I felt less like an author, and more like an intruder caught in an entity's private domain. I decided to return to the foyer, to regroup, to think. Leaving felt like surrender, yet staying felt like madness. Slowly, I retraced my steps through the rear hallway, torch probing every shadow. my hearing strained, catching each infinitesimal creak, each groan of the ancient structure. Near the foyer, the whispering resumed, fainter this time, yet more insistent, a layered susurrus, like multiple voices overlapping just beyond comprehension. I swept the light around frantically. Dust motes swirled, shadows clung stubbornly to corners. I swallowed, the sound loud in my own ears. My chest tightened painfully. The whispers seemed to crawl beneath my scalp. Then, a sudden, crushing pressure, as if the air itself had solidified. Breathing became laborious. My temples throbbed. Near the staircase again, movement, a figure gliding across the upper landing. My light leaped towards it. Nothing, only emptiness. My heartbeat roared, drowning out thought. I gasped for air that felt too thick to inhale. Every instinct screamed danger. Stumbling, I pushed towards the front door. My hand trembled as it closed around the cold metal knob. Turning it, poised on the threshold of escape, some unseen force compelled me to look back. The torch beam sliced through the foyer's gloom. There, in the corner, near the base of the stairs, a shape, hunched, indistinct, present for only a heartbeat before dissolving into the shadows. My breath locked in my throat. A wave of pure dread washed over me. I wrenched the door open and plunged out onto the porch. The cool rain struck my face like a benediction. I gasped, sucking in the clean, wet air. My heart still hammered. My clothes clung damply, saturated as much by sweat as by rain. Panting, I stood there, aiming the torch back through the open doorway. The interior lay still, inert, as if the phenomena I'd witnessed had been mere phantoms of my overwrought imagination, now retreated into the darkness. Yet the tightness in my chest remained, the chilling certainty of unseen scrutiny. Escape beckoned, yet curiosity, that relentless goad, held me fast. I had barely penetrated the mansion's surface. What other rooms lay hidden? What documents, what definitive proof might elevate my novel beyond mere speculation? Shadows and whispers replayed in my mind. I weighed the terror against the potential discovery. Finally, opting for a tactical retreat, I decided to seek refuge in the car, to breathe, to think. I trudged off the porch, my boots sinking into the rain-softened earth of the drive. The torch beam illuminated the slick sheen of wet leaves. Above, the wind sighed through the high branches. My body remained coiled tight, pulse still erratic. Reaching the car felt like reaching sanctuary, however temporary. I slid behind the wheel, rain plastering my hair to my forehead, my jacket heavy and cold. The engine remained silent, deep breaths, slow and deliberate. My hands still trembled. Had I imagined it all? Had isolation and suggestion conjured those fleeting shapes, those disembodied sounds? But the footsteps, the dragging noise, the whispers, they felt undeniably real. After several minutes, the frantic drumming in my chest subsided somewhat. I retrieved my notebook, forcing myself to document everything. The sounds, the spectral glimpses, the chilling message in the letter, the cellar's oppressive stench, the suffocating weight in the air. As I wrote, a profound chill permeated my bones. Shivering, I briefly ran the engine, coaxing warmth from the heater before cutting it again, wary of the battery. Through the rain-streaked windshield, the mansion loomed, a dark, inscrutable mass. Its windows remained blank, yet I half expected a face to materialize within their depths. Silence held sway outside. The house stood impassive, brooding, encircled by its sentinel trees swaying rhythmically in the wind. The urge to return, to delve deeper, warred violently with the visceral fear still churning in my gut, to find the source of the voices, to truly understand the story held within those decaying walls, or to flee while sanity remained intact. For a long while, I sat suspended in indecision, head aching, ears ringing with the phantom echo of whispers. Ultimately, exhaustion and prudence won. I had enough for one day. The engine coughed to life, headlights cutting twin paths through the rain and gloom, illuminating the puddled drive. My hands felt steadier now, capable of steering, but the knot of unease remained tightly cinched in my stomach. One last look at the mansion, its silhouette stark against the weeping sky. I pulled away, the tires splashing through the collected water, a complex brew of relief and profound disappointment churning within me. Driving back towards the main road, my thoughts circled relentlessly around the whispers, the footsteps, the fugitive shapes. Questions multiplied. I resolved to come back, better equipped, perhaps not alone, to capture tangible proof of whatever haunted those desolate halls. But for tonight, escape was paramount. Whether phantoms truly walked those corridors, or whether darkness and solitude had merely preyed upon my mind, I couldn't definitively say. All I possessed was the chilling conviction that the house was not empty, that it resonated with sounds and movements, defying rational explanation. The memory of the cellar's pale distortion, the sibilant whispers dogging my steps, sent prickles across my skin even now, hours later. My chest tightened, recalling the oppressive weight of the air, the feeling of being suffocated by unseen forces. Were they genuine spirits, or figments born of fear? I carried no proof, only fallible memories and scribbled notes, but I would return. Answers were necessary, even if the prospect of finding them filled me with terror. A fortnight now, since this apartment became mine, Elias's refuge. Pragmatism dictated the choice. Proximity to work, a rent that didn't wound. The building itself wore its age, a venerable facade over tired bones, though fresh paint lent a veneer of respectability, and the lobby seemed sufficiently kept. That first day dissolved in the rhythm of settling in, curtains hauled, the sofa assembled, the television tethered to the wall. By evening, a familiar, honest weariness settled over him. Nothing felt amiss. Midnight descended, and silence settled deep. The corridor outside his door, steeped in shadow, disturbed only by the low electric thrum of the distant exit sign. He shot the bolt, extinguished the lights, and surrendered to an untroubled sleep. Dawn arrived near 6 the following morning, heralded by a tread in the corridor. Not clamorous, no, but distinct enough, unmistakably human footfalls. An early riser bound for work, perhaps. Elias rose, donned his dressing gown, and eased the door open. The hallway stretched vacant before him. No soul stirred. He shrugged away the anomaly. It was merely his second day, after all. Easily attributed, he reasoned, to the building's eccentric acoustics, sounds migrating strangely from the stairwell or an adjacent unit. Work released him near 7 that evening. He collected his mail from the lobby's brass boxes, ascended the stairs, and arrived on his floor, his door the second on the right. A stuttering bulb overhead cast erratic light, a minor irritation he barely registered. Inside, the living room remained a cardboard labyrinth. He carved out a space on the floor, unwrapped some takeaway sustenance, and switched on the television for a murmur of distraction, attempting to unwind. Then, around 10, the familiar cadence returned. Footsteps, pacing directly before his threshold, moving back and forth, yet never pausing at any other door. He silenced the television, straining to confirm. The steps persisted for several heartbeats, then ceased. Rising, Elias swung the door wide. The corridor, bathed in the inconsistent artificial light, held only utter stillness. No receding figures, no closing doors, no hum from the elevator shaft. A prickle of unease traced his spine, but he rationalized it away. A neighbor in soft-soled shoes, perhaps, vanishing swiftly into the stairwell's shadows. He secured the lock once more and sought refuge in the screen's flickering glow. Through the subsequent days, the phantom tread recurred, unpredictable in its timing. Sometimes it arrived with the dawn, sometimes cloaked deep in the night. Each instance shared the same measured, deliberate pace, like a purposeful patrol. Never once did he catch a glimpse of the walker. Elias attempted dismissal, blaming the strain of work, the building's antiquated ventilation system acting as a conduit for errant sounds traveling through the structure's old bones. Friday prompted a small, almost absurd experiment. Upon returning home, Elias affixed a strip of adhesive tape across the exterior of his door, low down, near ankle level, a crude tripwire born of gnawing curiosity. Around 9 that evening, the footsteps commenced their patrol. He sat ensconced in darkness, his back pressed against the door's wood, listening. After a minute or so, they stopped. Carefully, he eased the door ajar. The tape remained inviolate, undisturbed. The flickering bulb overhead cast dancing shadows down the deserted hallway. A knot formed low in his gut. Retreating inside, he tried music, but it offered no solace. The night dissolved into restless circuits of his living room, sleep a distant shore. The weekend saw a flurry of unpacking, an attempt to impose order onto the encroaching chaos. Elias sought sanctuary in arrangement, repositioning his bed against the far wall, away from the door, setting up a small desk near the window, trying to forge a comforting routine. Midday Saturday, while organizing the bathroom cabinet, he heard something new. Not footsteps this time, but a muted concussion from the corridor, like a fist gently meeting plaster. He froze, pulse instantly quickening, palms growing slick. Emerging cautiously, toilet brush still clutched like a makeshift weapon, he found the sound had ceased. A wave of the ridiculous washed over him, yet a tremor persisted beneath his ribs. He took several measured breaths to calm himself before venturing into the hallway again. Once more, it was vacant, holding only the low electrical sigh of the lights. He went back inside, secured the deadbolt, his concentration irrevocably fractured. That night became a vigil. Darkness reigned in the apartment, save for the small lamp casting long shadows in the living room. Elias sat on the sofa, notebook poised, ready to document. Near midnight, a faint drag scraped across the floor overhead. Furniture shifting, perhaps. Then the inevitable tread returned, unnervingly close. He pressed his ear against the door's barrier, tracing its path, left to right, directly across his entrance. His pulse became a frantic drum against his eardrums. He scribbled, "Footsteps, 12:03 a.m." A moment later, a brief groan, like wood protesting, sharp and hinge-like, cut the silence. His mouth went parched. He flung the door open, hoping to ambush whoever lingered there, only to be met by emptiness. The erratic pulse of the overhead light was the sole movement. Neighboring doors remained resolutely shut. Swallowing hard, he walked towards the staircase and peered down into the vacant descent. A tremor seized his arms. He retreated, bolted the door, his nerves more frayed than ever before. The next day, intercepting Ms. Albright by the mailboxes, laden with groceries, Elias introduced himself and inquired tentatively about nocturnal disturbances. She canted her head, offering a small smile. Nothing beyond the building's usual groans and creaks, she assured him. Footsteps? No, she'd never noticed any. With a shrug, she attributed anything odd to the building's advanced age, wished him a good day, and continued on her way. A profound sense of isolation washed over Elias. Logic warred with experience. He wanted to dismiss the sounds as mere structural noise, but their cadence, their deliberate, human-sounding pace, felt too specific, too present. Reason offered no solace. Monday evening brought a new tactic: digital surveillance. Waiting until the corridor was clear, Elias positioned his phone discreetly on a small end table near his door, its lens aimed down the vacant stretch. Inside, he sat with the television muted to a whisper, straining to ensure the phone's microphone captured any sound. An hour later, he retrieved the device, its battery diminished. He scrubbed through the footage. Around the 40-minute mark, faint footfalls emerged from the phone's speaker. Leaning closer, amplifying the volume, he watched the screen intently. The corridor appeared utterly empty, yet the distinct sound persisted in the audio track. Then, at the precise moment the source of the sound should have materialized before the lens, there was nothing. No silhouette, no distortion, just vacant space. His throat constricted. He watched as the recorded footsteps ceased abruptly mid-stride, the hallway remaining perfectly still on screen. A chill settled deep in his chest. He archived the file, overcome by a sudden reluctance to revisit the disquieting proof. An attempt at early repose followed that night. Phone silenced, curtains drawn tight, earplugs inserted against the world. But around 2 a.m., Elias awoke with his heart hammering against his ribs. A new sound, the grating screech of a chair leg dragged across the floorboards in his living room. The earplugs lay dislodged beside him on the pillow. He had heard it clearly. His throat went instantly dry. He switched on the bedroom lamp and stood motionless, listening. Silence answered him. Then a subtle rustle, indefinable, like the impression of weight settling onto the sofa cushions. His hands began to shake. He seized the nearest heft, a flimsy metal floor lamp, and crept into the living area. The sofa was unoccupied. The chair sat exactly where he'd left it. Nothing looked moved. The television screen was dark, the front door still securely locked. His entire body felt rigid with tension, his breath ragged and shallow in the quiet room. He turned on every light, systematically checked every closet, even opened the kitchen cabinets. Nothing. The thought of calling the police flickered, but what could he report? No forced entry, no tangible evidence of intrusion. He remained awake, bathed in the apartment's artificial daylight until the true dawn finally broke. Work the following day was a fog of exhaustion. Productivity plummeted, concentration shattered as his mind endlessly replayed the unsettling events, searching desperately for a rational anchor. He returned home that evening, resolute, determined to find a physical cause. He conducted a thorough sounding of the apartment, tapping walls, checking junctions, seeking resonant voids or hidden conduits that might explain the strange acoustics. Everything felt solid. He switched off the air conditioning, plunging the apartment into near silence. It remained that way until around 9, when he heard it again, a whisper of movement, faint but undeniable. Not from the hall this time, but originating within his bedroom. He bolted towards it. The door was closed, the room beyond dark, just as he'd left it. He flung it wide, slapped the light switch. Immaculate stillness greeted him. The bed was neatly made, the desk orderly, the closet door firmly shut. His heart pounded against his ribs. He checked beneath the bed, vacant. He opened the closet. Only his clothes and a couple of stacked boxes met his gaze. No sign of disturbance. As he backed slowly out into the hallway, an inexplicable cold draft suddenly caressed his ankles. No window was ajar. He froze, scanning the empty air, seeing nothing. His arms prickled with goose flesh. Morning found him descending to the ground floor, seeking Mr. Davies, the building manager, in his small office. Elias explained the unsettling acoustics, inquired about any known quirks in the plumbing or ventilation systems. Mr. Davies offered a sympathetic but dismissive shake of the head. Everything was nominal, he stated. The prior occupant, he added, had never lodged any complaints. His gaze held a hint of skepticism, bordering on pity. When Elias asked about the security cameras in the hallway, the manager acknowledged they sometimes experienced glitches, but confirmed there was no record of any unauthorized presence on the floor. Elias retreated, feeling invalidated, adrift. No one else shared his experiences. No one offered corroboration. Doubt gnawed at him. Was his own mind betraying him? Yet the recorded sounds, the chilling drafts, the visceral encounters felt undeniably authentic. That night, midnight resurrected the footsteps. They commenced their protracted patrol back and forth, lasting a full 2 minutes by his phone's clock. His mouth felt arid, the blood roaring in his ears. He remained frozen in bed this time, too unnerved to confront the emptiness again, praying for cessation through sheer neglect. Eventually, they stopped, but the silence was short-lived. A new horror began, faint tapping, knuckles against plaster, it sounded like, in a deliberate, slow rhythm. His legs felt leaden as he sat bolt upright in bed, listening intently. The tapping migrated, first seeming to come from the living room wall. He clenched his fists, his breath hitched. Then, impossibly, it moved to the partition directly behind his headboard. He leapt from the bed, phone clutched like a talisman, and stood exposed in the center of the room. The tapping instantly went silent. His hands quaked so violently, he nearly dropped the phone. Solitude in the darkness felt suddenly unbearable. Hastily stuffing essentials into a backpack, he fled the apartment, seeking the anonymous refuge of a cheap motel room for the night. Dawn saw his reluctant return, fueled by a mixture of irritation, a sliver of shame at having run, and stubborn resolve. This was his space, paid for with his earnings. He refused eviction by the unseen without understanding. A new strategy formed. He deployed a small camera within the apartment, positioning it in the living room, its lens trained squarely on the bedroom door. He left every light blazing defiance against the shadows and settled in to wait. Hours crawled by in silence. Then, around 1 a.m., a motion notification pinged his phone, shattering the quiet. He jolted from a doze on the sofa and watched the live feed with mounting dread. The bedroom door stood agape on screen, a configuration he knew he hadn't created. His stomach lurched. A quick glance across the room confirmed the physical door remained firmly shut. Yet the digital eye insisted it was wide open. A subtle flicker distorted the camera image momentarily, like electronic interference. His breathing accelerated, a tingling numbness spreading through his hands. Then, on the video feed, the impossible happened. The open door drifted languidly shut, seemingly on its own accord. All the while, its real-world counterpart remained static, resolutely closed. After a few seconds, the feed normalized, showing the door properly shut again. Utterly bewildered, Elias walked over to the actual bedroom door, grasped the handle, and turned. It swung open freely, unlocked, unimpeded. No rational explanation for the camera feed's hallucinations surfaced. He rewound the recording, watching the bizarre sequence again. 10 seconds of impossible openness, then autonomous closure. His legs trembled beneath him as he stood there, pulse hammering at his temples, his chest tight with a nameless pressure. The truth settled then, cold and unavoidable. Dismissal was futile. These events were not ceasing. Escape beckoned, a tempting siren call, yet finances tethered him firmly to this place. Beyond practicality, though, a deeper, irrational compulsion arose to face this phenomenon, to confront whatever resided here, even though it defied all logic, to demand an answer from the encroaching void. He spent the remaining hours illuminated, sleep deferred until dawn's gray light filtered through the blinds. His phone screen remained a constant, anxious reference point, but the camera captured no further anomalies that night. Another day brought another neighbor encounter, Mr. Henderson this time, emerging from his apartment pulling a small suitcase. Elias posed the now familiar question about nocturnal oddities. Mr. Henderson offered a quick headshake, asserting everything seemed perfectly normal to him. He cast a peculiar searching glance at Elias, however, when the footsteps were described. Off on business, he claimed, before wheeling his luggage towards the elevator. Elias lingered in the hallway after he'd gone, staring up at the faltering light overhead. The building felt wrapped in an unnerving quiet, profound and empty. No other doors opened, no life stirred. He retreated into his own unit, the click of the lock echoing ominously in the silence. 2 weeks Elias has resided within these walls. The footsteps remain erratic visitors. The tapping persists, an intermittent, unsettling percussion. Sometimes shadows writhe peripherally in the hallway, shifting across the worn carpet where no form stands to cast them. He still mouths the rationalizations, tricks of the light, quirks of old wiring, but the words feel increasingly hollow, threadbare. Certainty erodes with each fresh incident. The stuttering hall light now sparks a jolt of adrenaline, a constant silent question. Will I see something this time? He reviews his camera recordings daily, a secret archive of the uncanny, but shares them with no one. The fear of dismissal, of being labeled unhinged is too great. The line between perception and delusion wavers, fragile and thin. Yet what he hears, what he sees in the dead of night, feels terrifyingly valid. He meticulously secures every lock, keeps his phone perpetually charged, poised to capture the next inexplicable event. An unshakable conviction of being observed has taken root, a disquieting scrutiny emanating from the apartment's own shadowed corners. He remains anchored here, lacking a clear financial escape route, but also driven by a desperate need for undeniable proof before severing ties, before breaking his lease and fleeing. More cameras are planned, additions to his chronicle of the strange. He knows this isn't normal. His own body betrays his fear with every occurrence. The racing pulse, the slick palms, eyes stinging from gnawing sleeplessness. A leaden dread settles low in his gut, a constant weight. Yet departure feels impossible without comprehension. So Elias waits, perpetually alert, listening for the next tread, the next tap, the next chilling confirmation that he is not truly alone here. He stands vigilant on the edge, uncertain of what expects him, knowing only that something is profoundly wrong, something that erodes the very foundations of his understanding and pushes him steadily towards an unknown precipice. My constitution isn't built for trembling, yet these past weeks have frayed something deep within me, exposing nerves I never knew I possessed. For several years now, the quiet hours between dusk and dawn have been my domain, overseeing a modest residential complex as its night watchman, Elias. Typically, the hours unfurl in quietude, a procession marked only by the scuttling of unseen creatures near the refuse bins, the occasional stray feline, perhaps a masked raccoon bandit. But lately, another presence shares the nocturnal landscape, and it bears no resemblance to the local fauna. My ritual commences around the 10th hour. The old sedan sighs into a visitor's space. I stride towards the sentinel box by the main gate, exchanging clipped pleasantries with the departing guard. We trade notes on directives from the ever-frugal Mr. Finch, the condo manager, or murmur about failing corridor lights. Then, the vigil becomes mine. It's a twofold duty, monitoring the grainy dance of shadows on the screens within the station, punctuated by ambulatory patrols along the perimeter and through the central parking expanse. The complex itself comprises roughly 25 units scattered across several low buildings, encircling the asphalt heart where residents park. A gate, responsive only to resident remotes, guards the entrance, while the perimeter wall, formidable and crowned with a jagged tiara of broken glass, offers a semblance of security. Not opulent, but generally perceived as safe harbor. Normality fractured about 3 weeks past. That's when I first registered the shape, a fixture lurking in one of the parking lot's gloomier recesses. A particular corner suffers from a weak overhead lamp, perpetually casting it in deeper shadow. Adjacent to the concrete boundary wall, where a pair of seldom stirred vehicles reside, this patch of fractured asphalt cradles a perpetual slick of moisture, a shallow puddle defiant of evaporation. An earthy scent of damp decay hangs there. One night, tracing my customary route, my gaze snagged on a figure clad in a hooded sweatshirt. It stood sentinel still, oriented towards the sleeping vehicles. My steps halted, my focus narrowed. The figure remained immobile. A frantic drummer took up residence in my chest. I recall scrutinizing the cowl's silhouette, the faint suggestion of shoulders beneath the fabric, limned by meager moonlight. A challenge formed on my lips. "Hey, you there?" but died unspoken against the silence. Hesitantly, I advanced, slicing the darkness with my torch. The beam trembled, betraying my hand, or perhaps just the rhythm of my labored breath. The instant the light threatened to fully illuminate that shadowed pocket, it was empty. My torch swept wildly, probing behind the parked cars, scouring the ground for any sign, any indentation. Nothing. Only a cool breeze whispering across my exposed arms lingered. It was the first discordant note in years of uneventful shifts. Retreating to the station, I rewound the relevant camera feed. The equipment is archaic, the resolution coarse, yet undeniably, a dark smudge occupied the screen for several seconds, motionless, precisely where I'd encountered the void. Then, abruptly, it wasn't there. It didn't recede or flee. It simply ceased to occupy the pixels. The following night, my attention clung to the monitors. My patrols, conducted hourly, felt charged with anticipation. 2 nights slipped by uneventfully. Then, on the 4th night post-incident, during the deep night round near Tukok-am, the world seemed muted. Only the omnipresent electrical hum and the distant murmur of a television from an upper apartment broke the stillness. A faint rustling near the wall. I spun, slicing the darkness with my torch. The hooded figure occupied the same damp corner. The shadows clung so densely I couldn't discern a single feature. No hint of chin or nose, just the dark cowl and the unnerving posture. Air snagged in my lungs. "Excuse me," I managed, my voice thin, unsteady. "Are you a resident?" Silence answered. This time, resolve propelled me forward instantly. 5 swift strides, my shoes grating on the asphalt. The figure held its ground. 1 more step. Gone. As if erased from existence between one heartbeat and the next. I jerked the flashlight beam around again, bathing the undercarriages of nearby vehicles in harsh light. My heart hammered against my ribs. The radio felt heavy in my hand. The thought of summoning the police flickered and died. Explaining a vanishing specter seemed ludicrous. I completed the patrol, but for the remainder of the shift, the monitors held my gaze captive. A few nights later, I cautiously queried a couple of residents about anything unusual. Blank faces, mostly. But Mr. Abernathy from the B block, his voice hushed, spoke of glimpsing a hooded man near his sedan around midnight some days prior. Assuming a potential thief, yet unwilling to risk confrontation alone, he'd simply waited, anxiously, until morning light confirmed his vehicle was untouched. No theft, no damage, but his certainty about the hooded presence resonated. A cold current traced my spine. A burglar scouting? Possible. Yet thieves typically move, probe, act. They don't manifest and dissolve. And the vanishing act? That defied the logic of simple larceny. Subsequent nights saw a coil of tension settle deep in my muscles before my shift even began. Around midnight, a knot formed low in my belly. My jaw locked unconsciously. Traversing the parking lot became an exercise in hypervigilance. Every skittering leaf, every flicker of a distant streetlight felt portentous. I clung to the tangible reassurances. Flashlight, radio, the theoretical option of police backup. But the strain made each circuit feel longer, heavier. Perhaps a week into this unsettling rhythm, the figure reappeared on the camera feed around 1:30 a.m. I sat hunched in the station, eyes fixed on the split-screen display covering multiple angles. The corner camera stuttered, a known issue, likely a loose connection. Through the electronic snow, a static-shrouded form materialized. I leaned closer, knuckles whitened against the console. It was there, utterly still. A single drop of perspiration traced my temple. Zooming yielded only a coarser silhouette against the grainy backdrop. For a full minute, maybe two, I watched its immobility. Then, another visual hiccup, and the space it occupied was vacant. I grabbed my flashlight, propelled by adrenaline, and burst from the station. My heart thudded painfully. I strode rapidly towards the corner, beam cutting ahead. My footfalls clattered against the concrete hush. A distinct chill permeated the air, carrying the familiar miasma of wet asphalt and faint exhaust. Methodically, I checked between, under, behind each vehicle. Emptiness greeted me. The persistent puddle reflected only my own anxious face in the dim overhead glow. No disturbance, no trace. I stood listening for retreating steps, hearing only the thrum of my own pulse. Unease became my constant companion. Daylight hours offered little solace. Sleep became shallow, fragmented. Curtains drawn, I'd lie staring at the ceiling, thoughts chasing each other in frantic loops, replaying the image of that hooded stillness. Was it human? Something else? Cold water shocked my face, a temporary anchor, but by evening, the familiar tension returned. A cycle of strained nights and restless days took hold. I broached the subject with Mr. Finch, a compact man with a polished scalp, perpetually clad in a neatly tucked collared shirt. I spoke of a potential trespasser, mentioning the sightings, the footage. Initial concern flickered in his eyes, but dissipated as he viewed the grainy recordings. He waved them away, glitches perhaps, or adolescent mischief. "Maintain vigilance, Elias," he instructed, his tone lacking urgency. "Inform me of any tangible developments." My request for improved lighting in the problematic corner was met with a non-committal promise to investigate costs. New lamps, after all, require expenditure. My mind wrestled with explanations. A skilled intruder, adept at concealment? But how bypass the gate sensor? Could such a presence scale the glass-topped ramparts undetected? Possible, yet improbable, without sound or sign. A nocturnal resident with eccentric habits? Why the secrecy, the impossible disappearances? Mr. Abernathy's account mirrored my own experiences too closely for coincidence. We couldn't both be conjuring the identical phantom. One night I altered my strategy. Instead of patrolling, I found concealment myself, melting into the shadows behind a hulking SUV near the notorious corner around midnight. I would wait, see if the darkness would yield its secret. The night draped itself heavily. A distant siren wailed miles away. The overhead lamps hummed their low electric drone. My legs began to ache. Leaning against the cool metal, I kept watch. An eternity seemed to pass. Then, a flicker at the edge of vision snagged my attention. Near the wall, perhaps 15 feet distant, the hooded figure stood, facing the lot once more. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic bird trapped in my chest. I attempted a slow, stealthy approach. 2 steps. It must have sensed me. Gone. I covered the remaining distance in a short sprint. Nothing. The air was still, undisturbed. Then, a phantom whisper of abrasion on grit behind me. I whirled, finding only my own distorted silhouette stretching long and thin across the pavement. The fine hairs on my arms prickled. Later that same night, closer to 3 a.m., back within the relative safety of the guard station, I heard it. The distinct crunch of footfalls on the gravel walkway flanking the building. I seized my torch, flung open the door. Silence abruptly descended. Stepping out, scanning the path, the bordering shrubs, nothing. My breath came in shallow gasps. I swept the light across the landscaping. No movement, no displaced leaves, just the faint, unreliable pulse of the parking lot illumination. Sweat beaded on my forehead, my uniform shirt clinging damply to my back. When dawn finally broke and my relief arrived at 6 a.m., I felt utterly drained, nerves raw. The next day, I attempted conversation with the daytime guards. They reported nothing amiss, admitting they seldom ventured far from the station during daylight hours. Resident traffic kept them occupied. One offered a jest. Perhaps less coffee, more rest, Elias? The forced chuckle caught in my throat. The isolation of the experience deepened. A few nights thereafter, around 2:45 a.m., another sighting flickered onto the monitor. Same corner, same hooded silhouette. Perhaps taller this time, or merely the angle. Flashlight in hand, I exited the station, power walking towards the spot, my legs feeling strangely disconnected. As I rounded the final parked car, I saw it, from behind, the first time. The fabric, a somber charcoal or black, seemed aged, worn. I observed the subtle lift and fall of shoulders, mimicking breath. My command, "Stop!" ripped through the quiet. A fractional turn of the hooded head, faceless still. Then, impossible speed. It bolted, rounding the flank of a sedan. I gave chase, covering the few yards in desperate strides. I arrived split seconds later to absolute emptiness. There hadn't been time for anyone corporeal to vanish so completely. I stood panting, hands on my knees, staring at the vacant air. The wind held its breath. No doors slammed, no gates whirred. My flashlight beam trembled as I scanned the silent buildings. A few windows glowed dimly, but no faces watched from within. The complex felt utterly deserted, save for me and this presence. My stomach churned. Pins and needles danced along my arms. I drew my phone, considered calling Finch despite the hour, but what more could I convey? I retreated to the station, sinking into the chair, fighting to regain composure. As the nights bled into one another, its presence became a palpable weight, sometimes perceived even when unseen. A peculiar density to the atmosphere near that corner. The fine hairs on my nape would stir without cause. My vigilance intensified. Monitor checks became compulsive. Patrols more frequent. Each step fraught. The job, once a haven of quiet routine, transformed into a crucible of anxiety. Every creak of a settling building, every pop of a cooling engine, sent jolts through my system. One evening, around 11, Mr. Abernathy appeared at the kiosk window, his face etched with worry. He'd seen the hooded man again, near his car, barely an hour before. Had anyone else reported it? I confessed they hadn't, but confirmed my own sightings, the baffling camera evidence. I admitted my utter inability to comprehend it. He simply nodded, his gaze distant. "It doesn't sit right, Elias," he murmured, a deep disquiet. His unease mirrored my own perfectly. He shuffled back towards his apartment, leaving me alone with the weight of the unknown. Nearly a lunar cycle has passed since the initial sighting. The apparition persists, an intermittent sentinel in that shadowed alcove, though its appearances aren't nightly. Sometimes days pass in tense normalcy before it manifests again. Standing, watching the inert vehicles, occasionally seeming to glide between them. It commits no vandalism, attempts no theft. It merely is. Yet its quiet presence is enough to infuse my rounds with a chilling dread. Each attempt to capture definitive proof, to confront it successfully, dissolves into failure. Varying my patrol routes, focusing the camera's inadequate zoom, lying in wait, all fruitless. It arrives on its own terms, departs without a trace. No scuff marks endure. No discarded items betray its passage. Only the residue remains, a pounding heart, a gnawing uncertainty that clings long after my shift concludes. I exist now in a state of perpetual anticipation. Is it a prankster of uncanny skill? Someone nursing strange intentions? Or something that slips through the cracks of understanding? Regardless, each time I step onto that asphalt expanse under the cloak of night, my eyes instinctively seek that corner. My grip tightens on the flashlight. My breathing shallows. My hearing strains for the whisper of unseen movement. It feels like a confrontation suspended in time, against an opponent whose nature remains terrifyingly obscure. A presence that refuses definition. The police remain unsummoned. I possess nothing concrete, no evidence of illegality. Mr. Finch remains reluctant to involve authorities without clearer cause. Vigilance is my only recourse. Mr. Abernathy shares my anxiety, but the wider community remains oblivious or dismissive. A phantom prowler, some joke lightly. Laughter finds no purchase in me. Each night poses the same silent question. Will this be the night I see its face? The night an explanation surfaces? The tension sits like a leaden weight in my gut, and each shift feels like a tightrope walk over a chasm of mounting dread. Dawn approaches. Another shift nears its end. An hour ago, the monitor showed the hooded shape. Same corner, same vanishing act. My equilibrium is shattered. My hands retain a slight tremor. 15 minutes remain until the day guard relieves me. Home offers the promise of rest, but sleep, when it comes, will likely be shallow, haunted. Yet tomorrow, the cycle renews. Back to this place, this vigil. Back to the parking lot, the cameras, the flashlight held like a talisman. Waiting for the hooded figure, half dreading, half desperate for the encounter that might finally yield an answer. For now, there are only questions, piling higher with each elusive sighting. "15 feet skyward, the wounds scarred the bark. A tremor ran through my hand as fingertips traced the gouges, each channel deep enough to swallow 3 fingers whole. No bear clawed this tree. Nothing known in 2 decades traversing these peaks had left such a mark. The wood beneath, freshly exposed, gleamed pale and violated in my flashlight's cone. A prickle crawled my nape, the memory, sharp as glass shards, of those crimson eyes moments before, suspended impossibly far above the forest floor. Perhaps the genesis of this night requires telling. Silas Thorne, that's my name. Solitary nocturnal journeys through the Cascades have been my ritual, my solace, for the better part of my adult existence. There's a profound stillness, walking trails bathed only in starlight. The day trippers vanished, the woods breathing audibly around you. Madness to some, this deliberate courting of darkness. Yet the wilderness has always felt more like home than any city's clamor. Until last night. My truck rested at the Copper Creek trailhead by 8, twilight bleeding from the bruised sky. Early October offered air crisp, but not yet biting. A generous three-quarter moon cresting the ridgeline. Conditions immaculate for a night expedition. My pack held essentials: water, nuts, and dried fruit, trekking poles, the requisite LED headlamp, and a backup torch. Clear skies were promised till dawn. The initial 2 hours delivered precisely the communion I sought. Lunar radiance washed the landscape in liquid silver. Distant owls exchanged cryptic calls across the valleys. My boots whispered against the gravel path, drawing me deeper into the embrace of the valley. I bypassed the Summit Lake turnoff, adhering to the main trail as it coiled through groves of ancient Douglas fir, their colossal trunks ascending like pillars in some forgotten, lightless cathedral. Around 10:30, I paused at a favored sanctuary, a fallen behemoth beside a murmuring stream. Extinguishing my headlamp, I allowed my vision to surrender fully to the moon's soft dominion. Water sighed over stones. A breeze stirred the high canopy, a sound like distant surf. This was my element. The knots of the mundane world loosened as I sat, consuming trail mix, absorbing the profound quietude of the night forest. Then, the first discordant note. Wood splintering, a report sharp and abrupt, perhaps 50 yards upslope to my right. My hand paused, mid-motion. Forest sounds at night are a familiar lexicon. Deer rustling, wind-thrown branches. But this possessed a different timbre. Heavier, calculated. A second crack followed. Nearer. Something substantial moved parallel to the trail, closing the distance. My headlamp flared back to life, its beam slicing through the undergrowth. Light snagged only on familiar trunks and the fronds of ferns. Yet the unseen movement persisted, punctuated now by snapping twigs and a new sound. A wet, rhythmic aspiration. The sound of immense lungs laboring. Every instinct shrieked for flight, but discipline held me fast. My own breath consciously steadied. Give large fauna space, and they typically withdraw. Running invites pursuit. Black bears I'd met before. Likely just another bear, though their nocturnal wanderings are uncommon. The huffing intensified, drawing closer. I could discern the sound of vegetation yielding. My beam jittered between trees, desperate for a glimpse, and then illumination found them. Twin points of ruby light reflected back at me from a height of at least 12 feet. Comprehension fractured. Bears don't attain such stature. Cougars don't. Nothing does. The eyes blinked. The panting ceased. Silence descended. Absolute save for the frantic drumming within my own chest. Then the eyes shifted, not advancing, but ascending, gliding smoothly upward until they surely hovered 15 feet above the ground. A silhouette darker than the night blotted the stars behind it, its true form frustratingly indistinct in the gloom, my headlamp beam seeming to refract, sliding away like light on oiled silk. A strangled noise escaped my throat, a primal utterance of pure animal dread. The red gaze snapped, locking onto mine. Swiftly it moved, not towards me, but mirroring the trail's path once more, flowing between the trees with an impossible, newfound silence. Those eyes, however, remained fixed upon me, twin embers burning in the void, glimpses registered, elongated limbs, too many limbs, articulating with fluid, unnatural grace. My paralysis shattered. Snatch at my pack and poles, I began walking rapidly down the trail, battling the primal urge to sprint. The eyes paced me, a constant, unnerving presence flickering just beyond the tree line. Every few moments they would elevate, then subside, as if the entity were undulating up and down the very trunks. Yet never a sound betrayed its passage. After 100 yards of this dreadful escort, the eyes abruptly surged vertically, higher than ever before. Then they vanished, extinguished, as if by a switch. I stood rigid, ears straining against the sudden void. Nothing. The forest held its breath. No owls called, no wind whispered, no small creature stirred. Only the roaring cataract of blood in my ears remained. My trembling fingers located the backup flashlight. Its beam stabbed into the trees where the eyes last burned. The powerful luminescence revealed only normalcy, bark, leaves, shadows. I swept the light back and forth, searching. That's when I saw the marks. They commenced some 4 feet up the trunk of a titanic fir, 4 parallel lacerations, each wide as my splayed hand, raked upward through the bark. They climbed relentlessly, impossibly high, 15 feet, easily. The exposed wood beneath shone pale, raw. These wounds were fresh. More scars adorned the next tree, and the one after, a chilling spoor of immense talons leading up the slope, charting the creature's path. In places, the gouges circumscribed the trunk entirely, suggesting a liquid flow around the wood as it ascended. I had to understand. Folly, perhaps lethal folly, but the need to witness consumed me. I abandoned the trail, following the line of violated trees uphill. My lights unveiled further evidence, patches where the forest floor was scraped bare, leaving parallel furrows in the earth, broken boughs dangling overhead, some thick as my thigh, snapped like kindling. This trail of ruin culminated in a small clearing. What lay there fractured my understanding of the natural order. The ground bore deep impressions, not footprints, but smooth concave depressions in the soil, as though something of immense weight had flowed across it, viscous and heavy. They led to the base of the most colossal tree I'd ever encountered here, an ancient cedar, its girth exceeding that of a car. The claw marks here were different, spiraling upward, wrapping the trunk repeatedly, ascending beyond the reach of my lights. But what arrested me, heart frozen, lay scattered at the tree's base. Dozens of what appeared to be shed scales littered the ground, varying in size from my palm to larger than platters. They were wafer-thin, yet possessed the unyielding hardness of steel. Lifting one, I saw its surface, an iridescent black, was veined with patterns that seemed to writhe and shift under my beam. Their edges were sharp enough to draw blood. It was then I heard it again, the huffing respiration originating from somewhere far above. The scale dropped from my numb fingers. I ran. To claim a controlled retreat would be falsehood. I crashed through underbrush, stumbled blindly down the slope, my lights dancing crazily. Behind and above, something vast moved through the canopy. Snapped branches rained down. Those burning eyes flared and vanished between the trees, always higher now, herding me back towards the trail. I struck the main path with bruising force, nearly sprawling. Without thought, I turned downhill and ran. Fitness is my ally, but terror lent me wings. The 3 miles back to the truck dissolved in what felt like moments, though my watch later insisted on nearly an hour. Throughout the flight, I felt those eyes observing from the towering darkness, yet they never closed, never initiated an attack, merely watched. Only in the relative sanctuary of the parking lot did my legs cease their frantic pumping. Fumbling for keys, I cast a final glance backward. There, at the very edge of my headlamp's throw, 2 crimson points floated in the night. They hung 30 feet aloft, perhaps more. As I stared, transfixed, they ascended smoothly, impossibly higher, until the trees swallowed them. A heartbeat later, a sound rolled down the valley. Not precisely a roar, nor a scream, but some unearthly resonance between the two. It reverberated off the mountainsides, making the windows of my truck hum. Then, silence reclaimed the night. Speed limits were fractured on the drive home. Hours bled into online searches, seeking echoes of my encounter. Nothing resonated, nothing aligned. The closest parallels lay in fragmented indigenous legends, tales of a being called the Night Climber, the Tree Walker, an entity said to haunt the forest canopy after dark, marking its domain with impossibly high claw marks. Ancient, intelligent, fiercely territorial, the stories claimed, yet they also whispered it rarely harmed humans who offered no direct threat. 3 times since, I have returned to that trail, always under the unambiguous gaze of daylight. The scars on the trees remain, slowly weathering. I've found more of those bizarre scales, discovered areas where the canopy is fractured and twisted, testament to something immense passing through. But the eyes have not reappeared. Sometimes, adrift in the quiet dark of my own bed, I ponder if the creature perceived a kinship, another solitary night walker, one who revered its arboreal kingdom. Perhaps that explains my deliverance, or perhaps it was merely asserting its dominion, warning me from its hunting grounds. I still seek the solace of nocturnal wood sometimes, but never alone and never on that trail. The forest feels altered now, larger, older, steeped in mysteries we have conveniently forgotten or deliberately chosen to ignore. "6 months I'd called this apartment mine, perched on the edge of town where the buildings thinned out. 6 months sharing a thin wall with silence, mostly, except for the near-daily sight of Miss Ilara Vance tending her improbable patch of earth. For a woman dwelling amid concrete and asphalt, her plot was a defiant sprawl of green, a meticulously curated universe of blossoms and burgeoning vegetables. She moved through it deliberately, a solitary figure devoted to her rouse. A polite nod, a ghost of a smile if I waved, that was the extent of our communion. Her reticence suited me. Silence is an easy neighbor. Then the rhythm broke. Weeks trickled by, unmarked until the absence solidified into fact. Ilara Vance was gone. Not just unseen, but vanished. Her garden, once a testament to constant care, began to fray at the edges. Petals drooped, browned, tomatoes sagged on the vine, collapsing into rot. A landscape turning spectral. Perhaps she'd journeyed to visit relatives, I reasoned initially, dismissing the prickle of unease. Yet the thought wouldn't settle. Ilara Vance belonged to that garden, tethered to it by ritual, season after season. Its sudden abandonment felt like a violation. A story stopped mid-sentence. A few evenings later, sharing a drink with Milo from across the landing, an affable sort, quick with a laugh, I voiced my quiet concern. "Haven't seen Ilara lately?" I offered, testing the air. Milo shrugged, preoccupied with his glass. "Nope, can't say I have." No curiosity, no shared flicker of worry. Still, the wrongness persisted. Each day, passing her darkened windows, the drawn blinds felt like closed eyelids. I'd find myself peering through the weathered fence slats, scanning the wilting greenery for any sign of her return. Nothing. Only the deepening stillness, the air of desertion thickening around her silent dwelling. Sleep was slow to come one night, the air thick and still, when a sound scraped at the edges of my hearing. Faint, indistinct, like fabric dragged across wood. I sat bolt upright, listening, tracing the whisper of movement. It emanated, impossibly, from Ilara Vance's apartment. Pulling myself from bed, I crossed to the window. Her place remained a dark silhouette against the lesser dark of the night sky. But the sound persisted, a furtive rustling within those unlit rooms. Curiosity, sharper than caution, propelled me. Maybe she was simply back, moving quietly in the night. Maybe my imagination had embroidered the silence with unease. Keys in hand, shoes hastily pulled on, I slipped out and crossed the small courtyard separating our buildings. Up close, the garden's decay was stark. Weeds threading through dying stalks, a faint miasma of decomposition hanging in the air. I approached her front door, feeling foolish, an interloper. My knock echoed slightly, unanswered. A second, louder rap yielded only silence. I began to turn away, chastising my own intrusion when the shuffling returned, clearer now, undeniably inside. "Ms. Vance?" I called out, my voice tight, pulse kicking up a notch. "Ilara, are you home?" Only the heavy quiet answered. My hand reached for the doorknob instinctively. It turned, unlocked. A wave of hesitation washed over me. This felt wrong, a trespass, but the need to understand, to resolve the dissonance was stronger. I pushed the door inward. Stale air, thick with dust motes dancing in the sliver of moonlight from the doorway, greeted me. The interior was chaos. Newspapers teetered in precarious stacks. Dishes overflowed the sink. Surfaces lay buried beneath layers of neglect. This disarray felt alien, a stark contrast to the meticulous order of her garden, the quiet precision I associated with Ilara Vance. "Ms. Vance?" My voice sounded thin, absorbed by the clutter. Silence, profound, but for that persistent, soft shuffling, now seeming to originate from deeper within the apartment. I moved forward, stepping carefully down the hallway, the carpet swallowing the sound of my feet. A palpable tension hummed in the air, the feeling of being watched, of intruding upon something private and broken. I reached her bedroom door and paused, the shuffling louder here, just beyond the wood. Drawing a breath, bracing myself against an unknown dread, I pushed it open. Darkness clung to the room, thick curtains blocking any external light. The bed was made, surfaces relatively clear, an island of order in the surrounding neglect. Then my eyes caught it, the closet door slightly ajar, a faint line of light escaping from the crack. My heart hammered against my ribs. Every nerve screamed retreat. But the question held me fast. One step, then another. My hand reached for the closet door. The instant my fingers made contact, the shuffling ceased. Absolute stillness descended. I froze, hands suspended, muscles coiled tight. Time stretched, thin and brittle. Slowly, deliberately, I pushed the door fully open. There, huddled low in the far corner, was Alara Vance, her eyes, wide and stark white in the dimness, fixed on me, reflecting raw terror. Her face was waxen, her hands trembling violently. "Miss Vance?" The name was a breath, barely audible. What are you doing?" She didn't speak, only stared, her gaze flitting nervously around the confines of the closet, as if tracking unseen threats. "Are you all right?" I asked, taking a hesitant step closer. She flinched, shrinking back against the wall, trying to make herself smaller. Then a whisper, so faint it barely disturbed the air. "He's watching." Ice traced its way down my spine. "Who? Who's watching?" My eyes scanned the shadowed corners of the bedroom, expecting a figure to resolve from the darkness. She just shook her head, tears welling, catching the faint light. "Always watching," she breathed. "He won't let me leave." A surge of protective anger rose in me. "Alara, come on," I urged, reaching out, placing a hand gently on her shoulder. "Let's get you out of here." She recoiled, pulling away sharply. "No," she insisted, her voice trembling uncontrollably. "If I leave, he'll find me. He always finds me." I stood helpless, searching for words of reassurance that felt hollow even to me. Who was this he? The room held only the two of us, the dust, and her palpable fear. "Listen," I said, striving for a calm I didn't feel. "I don't know who you're talking about, but you're not safe here like this. Come back to my place. We can call someone, the police. They can help." Her eyes met mine, a fragile flicker of hope, warring with ingrained terror. For an instant, I thought she might yield. Then her face crumpled. "He's here," she whispered, the sound almost lost. "He's always here." And then I heard it. A distinct creak from the hallway floorboards, the sound of weight settling, shifting. My blood turned cold. "Did you hear that?" I whispered, turning towards the darkened hallway. She nodded, her eyes stretched wide in confirmation. "He's coming." My mind raced. "Stay right here," I commanded, the words automatic, though leaving her felt like abandoning a post. I stepped out of the bedroom and into the hallway, fists clenched, adrenaline singing in my veins, ready to face whatever presence lurked there. The corridor stretched before me, empty, silent. I moved cautiously, peering into the shadowed doorways of other rooms. Nothing. The house remained still, yet the impression of being observed intensified, prickling the back of my neck. Reaching the end of the hall near the living room, nerves stretched taut, I risked a glance back towards the bedroom. A flicker, a shape, ill-defined, darker than the surrounding gloom, standing motionless at the far end of the hallway, observing me. My breath hitched. I took an involuntary step back. In that instant, the shadow dissolved, melting back into the oppressive darkness. Panic seized me. I spun and ran back to the bedroom, heart pounding. The closet stood open, empty. Alara Vance was gone. I searched frantically, calling her name, my voice echoing through the desolate rooms. No trace. It was as if she had evaporated into the stale air. Shaken, disoriented, I stumbled back to my own apartment, the silence of the night now feeling menacing. I called the police. They came, they searched her apartment thoroughly, their flashlights cutting sterile beams through the dust. They found nothing. No Alara Vance, no sign of forced entry, no indication of anyone else having been there. Weeks have bled into months now. She has not reappeared. Her garden remains, a wild, tangled testament to her absence, silently waiting under the indifferent sky. "20 paces from my unassuming sedan, I stopped. Motion ceased, breath caught, under the sodium glare of the deserted mall lot, deep in the dregs of the night. 11:47 p.m. registered somewhere abstractly. A shape occupied my driver's seat. Not merely dark, but a condensation of shadow. Its head canted slightly over the headrest, shoulders slumped as if burdened. My car keys, clutched tight, bit constellations into my palm. A frantic pulse hammered a frantic rhythm against my ribs. I squeezed my eyes shut, a hard, desperate blink against the impossible. When they opened, the car stood empty, innocuous. Stillness stretched, measured not in seconds, but in the slow crawl of sweat down my spine, defying the crisp October air. The vast expanse of asphalt yawned around me, punctuated only by a distant cluster of vehicles near the perpetually lit 24-hour fitness center. Silence reigned, absolute and profound. No hum from the highway, no lingering echo from the shuttered shops, not even the chirr of insects. Only the low thrum of the overhead lamps and the ragged whistle of my own breathing, suddenly too loud, too fast. Coherence surfaced slowly. Call for help. My phone felt alien in my trembling hand. The emergency number glowed, but my thumb hovered, paralyzed. What report could I possibly file? Thought I saw a ghost in my car, but it vanished when I blinked. They'd ask if I'd been drinking, if I needed a different kind of assistance entirely. Tentative steps closed the distance. My gaze swept the perimeter, beneath the chassis, between the sparse neighboring cars. Nothing. No flicker of movement, no crouching form. The windows gleamed unbroken. I pressed the fob. The locks clicked. Lights flashed their ordinary welcome. The alarm remained silent. "Is anyone there?" The question emerged thin, swallowed by the immense quiet. Silence answered. Closer now, I circled the vehicle, peering through the glass. The interior presented a picture of mundane normalcy. My laptop case rested on the rear seat, precisely where I'd tossed it hours ago. No disruption, no splintered plastic near the handles, no telltale scratches. Stress, I told myself. Too many late nights, drowning in caffeine, project deadlines looming. My mind, frayed and overtaxed, was surely conjuring phantoms. It had to be. Yet my hand shook as it reached for the driver's door. A fractional pause, then a sharp tug. The door swung wide, spilling pale dome light onto vacant upholstery. I leaned in, a cautious reconnaissance. Back seat clear, floor wells empty. Nothing. But the air inside, it was wrong. Beneath the usual synthetic leather and lingering coffee aroma lay something else. A scent thick, loamy, reminiscent of disturbed soil or sodden autumn leaves, decomposing in shadow. My nose wrinkled. Had I tracked mud in earlier? A prickling sensation traced my skin as I slid behind the wheel. The seat felt cold, unnaturally so, a deep chill that seemed to emanate from the very fibers. I turned the key. The engine caught smoothly, the radio resuming its interrupted classic rock transmission. Everything operational. "Losing your grip, Elias," I muttered, fingers fumbling with the rearview mirror. "Ease up on the stimulants." Then recollection sparked. Security cameras, mounted high on the light poles, ubiquitous. I'd clocked them during previous late-night departures. If someone had been inside, their presence would be recorded. Undeniable. Engine idling, I wrestled with the urge to just drive away, to bury the strangeness under miles and sleep. But the uncertainty gnawed. Sleep wouldn't come. Questions would fester. I killed the engine, climbed out, locked the doors. The walk toward the mall's darkened bulk, specifically the side entrance near the loading docks frequented by security, felt miles long. Peripheral shadows writhed, playing tricks. The echo of my own footfalls seemed distorted, amplified against the building's flank. Glancing back, my car sat placidly under the yellow light, empty, ordinary. I pressed the intercom beside the security door. A beat of silence, then a weary voice crackled. "Yeah?" "Evening. Apologies for the hour. I work upstairs. I think someone might have attempted to get into my car. Any chance I could see the lot footage?" Another pause. "Show your ID." I held my access card up to the small camera lens. Seconds later, a distinct buzz click signaled the lock releasing. The security hub was a cramped space, bathed in the cool, multi-screen glow of surveillance monitors. A portly guard, maybe mid-50s, looked up from his phone, his name tag reading Sal. "Whereabouts you parked?" he asked, pocketing the device. I pointed vaguely, described the section. He navigated the feeds with practiced clicks, bringing up grainy, monochrome views of the lot. "Time?" "Just now. 15, maybe 20 minutes ago. Walking out, saw someone in the driver's seat." He nodded, rewinding the relevant camera angle. My own figure appeared, striding across the asphalt, then halting abruptly. The resolution wasn't sharp, but my posture, frozen, staring, was unmistakable. "Don't see nobody else," Sal observed, leaning closer to the screen. "Could you go back further? Maybe they got in before I came out." He spooled the footage back, time reversing in jerky increments. Cars zipped backward into spots, disappeared. He stopped it roughly an hour prior to my exit from the office tower. We watched. My car sat, isolated and undisturbed. Until 11:12 p.m., something shifted near the edge of the frame. A formless patch of darkness detached itself from the deeper shadows and began to glide across the parking lot toward my vehicle. It lacked clear definition, roughly human-sized, but blurry, indistinct, like a heat haze or a smudge on the lens itself. As it drew nearer the car, its form seemed to destabilize further, fraying at the edges. It reached my sedan and merged. No door opened, no window lowered. The blur simply flowed into the car's outline and vanished. "The hell is that?" Sal muttered, rewinding the sequence, playing it again. The same eerie ballet, shadow coalescing, drifting, dissolving into the vehicle. "Other angles?" My voice was thin, my mouth suddenly parched. He switched feeds. Different perspectives confirmed the unsettling event. The shadow's fluid approach, its increasing intangibility near the car, its absorption. Crucially, no footage showed anything emerging afterward. "Gotta be a system glitch," Sal offered, though conviction laced his tone like water in oil. "Get weird artifacts sometimes. Night vision, infrared, plays tricks." "Yeah," I managed weakly. "A glitch, must be." He offered an escort back to my car. I declined, not wanting him to witness the tremor in my hands. The return journey across the asphalt felt longer, heavier. Each step was a conscious effort. A part of me screamed to abandon the car, call a rideshare, deal with it tomorrow. But pragmatism, or perhaps denial, insisted I needed it. Drawing near, I saw it. An anomaly on the driver's side window. Under the harsh lot lights, intricate patterns, like frost on a winter morning, spiderwebbed across the glass. Odd, considering the temperature hovered comfortably above 50. Unlocking the door released the smell again, now intensified. The loamy, musty base remained, but overlaid with a faint, sharp metallic tang. The scent of old pennies or dried blood. The seat hadn't warmed. Its coldness was palpable, even inches away, a radiating chill. A sudden buzz from my pocket nearly sent me leaping out of my skin. A text from my wife. "Everything okay? You're usually home by now." My thumbs fumbled a reply. "Working late. On my way soon." Delay was no longer an option. Inhale, exhale, I slid into the driver's seat. The cold sank through my clothes instantly, settling deep in my bones. Engine on, heater cranked to inferno levels. I pulled out of the space. The drive home was a study in tension. My eyes flicked constantly to the rearview mirror, scanning the empty back seat, though some primal dread anticipated something. The car itself seemed unwell. The radio signal frayed intermittently into bursts of harsh static before clearing. The dome light pulsed with a sickly, irregular flicker. Defying the blasting heat, the temperature gauge needle swung erratically between hot and cold. Halfway home, a glance in the mirror froze my blood. Just for a heartbeat, a fraction of a second, the back seat wasn't empty. Not a clear figure, but a deeper node of darkness against the ambient night. A presence inferred rather than seen. My hands jerked the wheel. Tires squealed as I narrowly avoided drifting into the adjacent lane. Heart hammering, I snapped my gaze back to the mirror. Empty, but the glass itself had bloomed opaque with frost, obscuring the view completely. I reached my driveway in what felt like impossibly fast time, likely flouting several traffic laws. Engine silenced, I sat enveloped in darkness. The garage door opener clipped to the visor felt heavy, accusatory. I always parked inside. Always. Tonight, however, some deep-seated instinct recoiled from enclosing this car, this presence, within the confines of my home. Inside, my wife slept soundly. Claiming a headache, I bypassed conversation and went straight to bed. Sleep, however, remained elusive. Hours passed listening to the nocturnal sighs of the house, every creak amplifying the image from the parking lot, the feeling from the car. Morning light brought no relief. I called in sick. Once my wife departed for her own office, I ventured out to the driveway. At first glance, bathed in sunshine, The car looked ordinary. Then I opened the door. The smell hit me full force, the musty earthiness now underscored by a distinct note of decay. The driver's seat remained stubbornly cold, defying the hours spent warming in the sun, and the frost patterns still etched the windows, intricate and chilling. Wiping revealed the truth. They were on the inside. That same morning, I drove to the nearest dealership. I traded the sedan, accepting a significant loss without haggling. The urgency to be rid of it eclipsed financial sense. It should have ended there. New car, slate wiped clean. But the strangeness persisted, migrating. Subtle intrusions at first. Security cameras at my office would stutter and distort when I passed. The recorded footage momentarily marred by that familiar, smudgy darkness trailing in my wake. Electronics developed eccentricities in my presence. My phone's battery life plummeted. Light bulbs flickered as I entered rooms. The television screen would occasionally dissolve into snow when I settled onto the sofa. My new car, too, began to exhibit the symptoms. Phantom cold spots, the slow creep of that unmistakable smell, delicate frost blooming on the interior glass. And the shadows, always at the periphery, a flicker of movement, a deepening of shade where none should be. Gone when I turned to confront it directly, yet the certainty of its presence lingered, a silent, watchful pursuit. The other night, working late became unavoidable. Walking through the deserted lot toward my new car, I saw it. A figure slumped in the driver's seat. This time, I didn't freeze, didn't blink. I simply stood and watched as the head, a locus of deeper shadow within the dim interior, slowly turned toward me. No features resolved in the gloom, just an impression, chillingly distinct, of a smile. I turned my back, walked away, left the car sitting there. I haven't returned for it, haven't returned to work. I'm writing this now from a sterile motel room, 3 states removed, having arrived by bus. No vehicle to harbor the unnatural. Yet the lights in this room pulse erratically. The television offers only a blizzard of static. And last night, I awoke shivering, tracing the impossible frost patterns spreading across the inside of my window pane. It occurs to me now with sickening clarity that the thing in my car, the entity from the footage, was never interested in the machine. It was interested in the driver. I don't believe it will cease its pursuit until it claims what it followed. The air in this room grows colder. That familiar cloying scent of damp earth and decay seeps insistently from beneath the door. The corners of the room seem to gather darkness, pooling into depths that defy the cheap lamplight. I will send this account, then I will run again, but I feel it drawing nearer, an encroaching chill, and I know with a certainty that eclipses all reason that someday soon I will glance at a reflective surface, a mirror, a window, a monitor screen, and see not my own face, but that shadow waiting patiently behind the glass. And this time, when I blink, I will be the one to disappear.